You meditate. You journal. You read every book on growth, mindset, discipline. You chase calm, clarity, balance. You repeat affirmations, track your habits, set alarms to remind yourself to be grateful. And still, you feel restless. Not just tired, but spiritually uneasy. Like peace is something always just out of reach. Like no matter how much you improve, there's something broken that never quite heals. A low hum of inadequacy that won't go away, no matter how hard you work to silence it. Carl Jung warned about this. Not the desire to grow, but the obsession with becoming. The endless chase for a version of yourself that's more worthy, more lovable, more enlightened. This is the trap of constant self-improvement. And it's why you still feel empty, even when you're doing everything right. Because the chase isn't about healing. It's about escaping. Escaping the version of you that you secretly believe isn't enough. Before we go further, hit subscribe. Because if you've been caught in the cycle of fixing yourself, you need to hear what comes next. It might be the first time you've ever given yourself permission to just exist. To stop running. To stop endlessly polishing a mask in the hopes that someone will finally love what's underneath. Jung understood something that modern self-help often ignores. The more you chase your higher self, the more you reject your current one. You make an enemy of your imperfections. You split yourself into pieces. The you that exists now, and the fantasy you that will finally be enough. That split, that internal war, it's why you're tired. It's why you never arrive. Every new book, every new program, every new promise of transformation just reinforces the belief that you're not there yet. And it's not just exhausting, it's violent. A quiet, socially acceptable kind of violence, where you beat yourself up with vision boards, shame yourself with discipline, and call it growth. But what if real growth doesn't feel like war? What if it feels like homecoming? True peace, Jung believed, doesn't come from perfection. It comes from integration, from seeing every part of yourself. Not just the light, but the anger, the insecurity, the guilt, and saying, you belong here too. That's the part no one teaches, because integration isn't sexy. It doesn't sell, but it's the only path to peace. And most people aren't chasing growth. They're running from shame. And until that changes, peace will always be a moving target. Self-improvement is sold as the road to peace. Meditate more. Wake up earlier. Read faster. Work harder. Smile through the chaos. And yet, so many people doing all of that are still anxious, still restless, still quietly breaking inside. Why? Because the pursuit of a better self can quietly become a war against who you already are. Carl Jung understood this. He warned that when we chase growth without understanding, we risk reinforcing the very insecurities we're trying to escape. The shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, repress, or run from, doesn't disappear through morning routines or positive affirmations. It grows stronger every time we pretend it isn't there. Most people don't want transformation. They want to upgrade their mask, to appear disciplined, spiritual, confident, while inside they're exhausted from constantly trying to be something more. This isn't growth. This is self-rejection in disguise. Real peace begins where the performance ends. It begins when you stop asking, how can I fix myself? And start asking, why do I believe I'm broken? Because not every flaw needs fixing. Some just need facing. Some just need honesty. The trap of constant self-improvement is that it keeps you busy. So busy, you never have to sit still with the parts of you that are hurting. But Jung knew healing doesn't happen through perfection. It happens through integration, through seeing yourself clearly, shadow and all, and deciding you are still worthy of love, respect, and rest, without chasing a new version of yourself to earn it. Integration isn't glamorous. It doesn't trend on social media. It won't be captured in a perfectly lit morning routine video with soft music and clean aesthetics. Because integration looks like sitting in the quiet with everything you've avoided. It looks like confronting the memories you buried, the truths you distorted, and the pain you downplayed for the sake of survival. It looks like admitting you're tired of pretending to be okay, and finally telling yourself the truth you've been avoiding. It also looks like grieving, not just people or places, but grieving the version of yourself you forced to keep smiling, keep producing, keep performing, even while silently falling apart inside. The one who held it all together to avoid disappointing others. That version doesn't just disappear, you mourn it, and you thank it for getting you this far. Carl Jung didn't teach people to become better. He taught them to become whole. He understood that healing isn't about becoming some optimized ideal. It's about integrating everything you are. Your strengths, your shadows, your rage, your tenderness. It means making space for the parts of you that are angry, insecure, ashamed, or afraid. Not to indulge them, but to stop exiling them. Because everything you reject within yourself doesn't vanish. It festers. It controls you from the shadows. This is why some people can read 100 books, follow every wellness guru, and still not feel at peace. They've collected techniques, but never confronted their truths. They've mastered rituals, but haven't faced their own self-hatred. They've built routines, but are terrified of sitting in stillness. And until that happens, until they sit in that silence and ask themselves the hard questions, no habit tracker, no productivity hack, and no gratitude journal will bring real peace. Wholeness begins with brutal honesty. The kind you don't share for likes. The kind you whisper to yourself in the dark. The kind that doesn't chase applause but craves alignment. The kind of honesty that makes you close your journal mid-sentence because the truth is too raw. That honesty is what separates true healing from performative self-help. If you really want peace, you'll have to get uncomfortable. You'll have to peel off the labels that made you feel safe but kept you small. You'll have to let go of the polished version of healing you were sold. Because the real work isn't about becoming something more. It's about unbecoming everything you pretended to be. It's about coming home to what you've always been, but were never allowed to fully be. And that kind of peace? It can't be bought. It has to be earned through presence, through silence, and through the courage to face yourself without flinching. The obsession with becoming better has created a silent epidemic. People who hate who they are in the name of growth. It's no longer enough to just live. Now you must optimize, improve, evolve constantly. But improvement without self-acceptance is just self-abandonment with nicer packaging. Carl Jung warned that chasing the ideal self without facing the real self leads to fragmentation. The more you chase this image of who you think you're supposed to be, the more you disconnect from the person you actually are. And the more disconnected you become, the louder the inner tension grows. That's why people burn out in the middle of their healing journey. They've done the journaling, the breath work, the gym sessions, but they still feel unworthy. Not because those tools don't work, but because they were used to escape, not to embrace. You can't meditate your way out of a shadow you refuse to face. Peace doesn't come from changing who you are. It comes from knowing who you are. Fully, honestly, unapologetically. That includes the ambition and the anger, the confidence and the insecurity, the healer and the part of you still hurting. Wholeness isn't achieved by perfecting the self. It's achieved by uniting the pieces. If you want real transformation, stop running from the parts of you that don't fit the ideal. Sit with them. Listen to them. Let them speak. They are not the enemy. They are the map. One of the deepest lies in the self-help world is that if you're not constantly evolving, you're falling behind. That if you're not growing, you're wasting time. But Carl Jung would say, what if your stillness isn't failure, it's wisdom? What if not moving forward is sometimes the most meaningful movement of all? In a culture addicted to momentum, silence feels like death. But that's exactly where the psyche begins to speak. Jung believed that periods of inner quiet, what many call stagnation, are often the unconscious mind pulling back, not to give up, but to reorganize, to prepare, to integrate. These moments that seem like setbacks are often thresholds, psychological doorways, the place where your inner world rearranges itself without your conscious permission. Not every season is meant for expansion. Some are meant for digestion, for healing, for rest, for understanding the chaos you've already been through. When you skip these seasons, you don't grow. You fracture. You lose pieces of yourself chasing some imagined version of who you're supposed to be. But if you've been programmed to believe that peace only comes after the next milestone, then stillness will always feel like a threat. You'll run from the very thing that's trying to teach you. And here's the trap. The more you chase growth without listening, the more you disconnect from yourself. You become an algorithm of productivity, an identity built on effort. You stop being a person and start being a project. You start performing healing instead of living it. You wear self-awareness like a costume, but never actually touch the places that hurt. That's not healing. That's hustle dressed in spiritual clothes. Jung taught that true change happens when you stop trying to dominate your inner world and instead begin to dialogue with it. You don't need to silence your darkness to become light. You need to understand why it's there. Every emotion has a root. Every reaction holds a story. Every discomfort is a signal that something within you needs attention, not discipline. Peace doesn't come from fixing what's broken. It comes from listening to what's been ignored. It comes from creating space where nothing needs to be improved, only acknowledged. And once you can sit in that space without flinching, without planning your next move, without trying to upgrade yourself, you begin to heal. Not because you're becoming better, but because you finally stopped running. There's a lie buried deep in the self-help world, that peace is a destination you reach once you've fixed everything wrong with you. But Carl Jung saw it differently. He believed peace doesn't come from being perfectly healed. It comes from no longer being at war with yourself. The truth is, most people don't need another habit tracker. They need to forgive themselves. They need to stop measuring their worth by how productive, positive, or polished they can appear. Jung understood that the psyche doesn't crave perfection. It craves wholeness. That includes your fear, your flaws, your failures, all of it. Wholeness is messy. It's non-linear. It requires you to sit with contradictions, to be both confident and insecure, disciplined and lazy, healing and still hurting. But once you stop trying to resolve those contradictions and instead hold them together, something shifts. You stop chasing peace and start embodying it. Real self-work isn't about becoming someone else. It's about returning to the parts of you that got buried under the pressure to constantly improve. The parts that were shamed, silenced, or told they had to change to be loved. And once you reclaim those parts, not to fix them, but to welcome them, you begin to experience something radical. Not peace as an achievement, but peace as a presence. Quiet, steady, and already within you. At a certain point, self-improvement turns into self-avoidance. You start chasing new tools, new strategies, new hacks. Not because you're evolving, but because you're terrified of standing still. Stillness forces you to feel. And feeling, for most people, is the one thing they've been taught to run from since childhood. Sit still long enough and the noise settles. And underneath that noise, the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. Jung believed that the parts of ourselves we refuse to face don't disappear. They wait. They wait in the unconscious, in the shadow, in the quiet spaces between your goals. They influence your choices, your relationships, your reactions. And no amount of journaling, dopamine detoxing, cold plunges, or mindfulness apps will bring you peace if you're using them to escape your own reflection. Growth without confrontation is just distraction dressed as discipline. You can track your habits, perfect your calendar, and build the most polished version of yourself, but still wake up with a weight on your chest. That weight isn't laziness. It's unprocessed pain. It's grief you never named, guilt you never explored, truths you never said out loud. And until you stop trying to optimize your pain and start trying to understand it, you'll keep looping through the same emptiness with different packaging. Most people don't need another productivity system. They need to feel what they've been numbing. They need to confront the discomfort they keep medicating with more goals, more content, more motion. There is no peace in constant motion. There's only exhaustion, and exhaustion that feels productive is still just avoidance in disguise. The truth is, peace isn't found in the next upgrade. It's found when you stop trying to be a project, when you stop trying to become someone else and finally sit with who you already are. No edits, no filters, no performance. Just presence. Just breathe. Just being. That's the moment everything shifts. When growth stops being about running and starts being about returning, not forward, not upward, but inward. And in that inward return, you begin to realize you were never broken. You were just buried beneath layers of performance, pressure, and the lie that you had to earn your wholeness. Real peace begins where that lie ends. Peace doesn't come from fixing yourself. It comes from learning to sit with yourself without judgment. But most people aren't taught how to do that. They're taught to chase, to tweak, to optimize. Even rest has become a performance, another task on the checklist of self-perfection. Carl Jung knew that this obsession with constant self-betterment often hides a deeper fear, the fear of being truly seen as we are. Because to stop striving means confronting everything you've been trying to improve away. The insecurity, the loneliness, the resentment, the guilt, the shadow. But the shadow isn't your enemy. It's the part of you that holds the truth you're afraid to speak. The feelings you were told were unacceptable. The wounds you never gave yourself permission to feel. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean giving in to darkness. It means understanding that peace isn't found by eliminating your chaos. It's found by making space for it. Until you stop seeing parts of yourself as problems to solve, you'll keep mistaking control for healing. You'll keep thinking if you just become a little more disciplined, a little more productive, a little more perfect, then the anxiety will stop. But it won't. Because peace doesn't come when you finally become someone else. It comes when you're no longer afraid to be fully yourself. The real work isn't becoming a better version of you. It's remembering who you were before you believed you had to be better to be enough. Somewhere along the way, We started equating growth with discomfort, with struggle, with constantly pushing. Rest became laziness. Acceptance became complacency. And the idea of simply being felt like a betrayal to the mission of always becoming. But Carl Jung warned us, when improvement becomes obsession, it mutates into avoidance, a deeper avoidance of stillness, of silence, of self. We become so consumed with upgrading that we forget who it is we're even upgrading. This is the paradox. The harder you chase peace, the further it drifts. Because peace was never something to achieve. It was something to remember, something you were born with. But the self-improvement trap convinces you that you're incomplete until you become someone else. That if you just fix this next thing, change that next habit, buy the next book, you'll finally feel whole. And that lie keeps you running in circles, in confusion, in quiet desperation. You scroll past content telling you how to be more productive, more stoic, more focused, as if who you are now isn't already enough to be worthy of peace. And so you wake up with a checklist instead of a heartbeat. You measure your value by progress instead of presence. You lose touch with joy because your focus is always 10 steps ahead. And every day, you're a little more polished, but a little less whole. Jung taught that real transformation comes from accepting the full picture. Not just the driven self, but the tired self. Not just the confident mask, but the insecure voice behind it. The shadows you avoid carry the keys to your freedom. Until you can sit with both without trying to fix either. You will confuse exhaustion for growth. You will call anxiety motivation. You will see burnout as discipline. And you will never feel peace, even when you've improved. So maybe the next level of growth isn't more effort. Maybe it's more honesty. Maybe it's letting go of the chase long enough to realize you were never broken to begin with. Maybe peace begins the moment you stop running from the version of you that just wants to be seen, not sculpted. Maybe peace is found in the breath between your next goal and your forgotten self. And maybe, just maybe, that breath is enough. Peace doesn't arrive when everything in your life is finally fixed. It arrives when you stop needing everything to be fixed in order to feel whole. That's the shift. That's what Carl Jung was pointing toward. Not the fantasy of perfection, but the acceptance of contradiction, of wholeness that includes the broken pieces. Peace begins not when life gets easier, but when your relationship with your own imperfections changes. You don't need another routine. You don't need another book. You don't need to climb another ladder just to prove you're evolving. What you need is to make peace with the part of you that's tired of climbing, the part that wants rest, stillness, silence without guilt. Because constant striving often disguises a deeper belief that you are not enough as you are. And until that belief is dissolved, no achievement will ever feel like a rival. Real transformation is quiet. It's not loud or shiny. It's not documented in highlight reels. It happens in the pause. In the moment you stop trying to become someone better and start honoring who you already are. That's where the tension breaks. That's where healing begins. Not when you've built a flawless version of yourself, but when you embrace the one that exists right now. With all its complexity, all its mess, all its humanity. So if you've been running through goals, checklists, identity upgrades, slow down. Not because you've failed, but because you've finally realized the person you've been trying to become isn't out there. They're already here, underneath the striving, behind the masks, beneath the noise. The more you chase the next version of yourself, the further you drift from the truth that you were never broken to begin with. This is what they don't tell you about self-improvement. That the most evolved version of you isn't a project to build. It's a presence to remember. It's not about stacking more habits on top of your soul. It's about peeling back what was never yours to carry. Letting go of the pressure to perform healing. Letting in the permission to just be. And maybe that's the most radical form of growth. Choosing peace not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be.